Have you or a family member been personally victimized by the period drama community? If so, this may be the video for you.
Hi, we're Emily Davis Hale and Lauren Weathers. We host the podcast Reclaiming Jane, and together we make one whole non-white not woman.
We can't offer financial compensation, but we hope the rest of this video helps.
Okay, so we're not lawyers, even though we do play them very convincingly in YouTube intros. But fortunately, you don't need professional legal advice to figure out whether you can call yourself a fan of anything. No, not even when it comes to historical authors of fictional works. We've been there, trust me. It seems sometimes like all of the characters in a piece of media are white, straight, cisgender, and upper middle class, and often the creator is too. And when that's the case, it can feel really hard to justify being not those things when you're in the fandom. But I'm about to tell you two things. First, there are actually no rules about who's allowed to be a fan. And second, if anybody says that representation of people like you in insert historical period here is inaccurate, please send me their address because they're lying and I would personally like to fight them. Okay, let's tackle the fandom question. There's a lot of shady stuff that happens in fandom spaces online, especially when the media in question has some kind of historical tie. We're just going to talk about Austen-focused communities now as shorthand because, well, it's JaneCon. We love Jane. A lot of the rhetoric that hostile fans use is just empty. Contrary to popular belief, there is no fandom police. And yet the white, straight, cisgender people who have dominated these fan spaces are really reluctant to give up their power, so they wield their existing influence to drive out fans who might threaten their position on top of the food chain. The thing is, though, media isn't a finite resource. Jane Austen's works won't dissolve into the void as soon as they've been read by 10 million people or whatever. There's absolutely no logical reason to hoard enjoyment, because that's what these gatekeepers are trying to do. They don't want to share the things they enjoy with people they think are different. So, you know what? Screw them. Everybody gets Jane Austen now. I'm giving myself temporary dictatorial powers over this fandom, and I am telling you, specifically, that you can enjoy Austen any damn way you like. We good? Dictatorship rescinded. Unfortunately, even though many of us know it's ridiculous to form exclusive bans around media, that knowledge doesn't automatically change the existing landscape of fandom. So this is where we have to use our own agency to create spaces outside that mainstream and explicitly say this place is not for gatekeepers. There are already a lot of people doing this kind of community creation, and they rock. It opens up fandom to so many kinds of people who were excluded before, and we've got to keep that up. So how do we continue that project and make sure that everyone feels comfortable seeking a particular space in fandom? First, find other people who share your identity. You're not the only person of your race, gender, sexuality, disability, education, whatever, who likes a piece of media. I guarantee that. Side note to the straight, white, cisgender people who aren't gatekeeping and do want to support minoritized communities. Hype up their spaces, defend them against the gatekeepers, and don't try to insinuate yourself into spaces that aren't for or about you. You can also learn about people in history who shared your identity, because again, I guarantee they existed. There might be some heavy topics involved if you're getting into research, so be aware of that. But still, people of every race, gender, sexuality, and religion have existed throughout history as just normal folks. Plus, the Western canon is a single, minuscule slice of the potential perspectives to gain about history and literature. Now, speaking of literature specifically, we sometimes forget it's fiction. Even if it's a product of a specific historical time and place, it's made up. The characters are not real. So it's absolutely absurd to act like different interpretations are totally forbidden, 100% taboo. The author's original intention is sacred and cannot be altered. We're not doing that. Death of the author is ironically alive and well around here. Now, I'm sure you could write a dissertation on all the reasons that Mr. Darcy couldn't be a trans man in his specific historical setting, but you could also write a dissertation on how that doesn't matter because you're trans and you relate to Darcy, so he's also trans now. Basically, the media world is your oyster. Gatekeepers just never learned how to share, and there's plenty of space for you in fandom. Plus, even the almighty Western literary canon can and should be reinterpreted. So, go make Darcy trans, and please send me a link when you do.
So, speaking of Western canon, let's talk about why there are people of marginalized identities reading Jane Austen anyway. I mean, there are a lot of reasons, but let's talk about one of the big reasons why. If you grew up in the United States or a similar Western culture, there's a pretty high chance that at some point in your education, you were told what the literary canon was. And there's an equally high chance that every author in that canon was white, maybe with the exception of a Martin Luther King letter thrown in there for a bit of literal color. You know, a little zest, little pizzazz to add to your literary canon. So Western culture has told us for years that these are the good books, the important books, the books that we have to read if we want to be considered well-read. And regardless of whether or not that's true, it's not. Some of us read these books and ended up enjoying them, even though we couldn't necessarily see ourselves. And others read the books and liked them so much that they sought out a community of other people who really read and enjoyed and loved these books. And in some cases were rewarded with that community of people telling them that they weren't welcome or that their opinions were somehow wrong just because they read or they understood the book differently. Oh, but I thought these were the books we were supposed to be reading. Or was that wrong? Here's the thing. Jane Austen and the rest of the Western canon is often considered universal, and then the art and literature from literally everywhere else in the world is considered extra or unrelatable. But here's the secret. When people usually say universal when they're referring to something like literature or art, what they really mean is white. But themes are universal across experiences, across cultures, and across languages. I can relate to the theme of love in any story, even if it's set in a time or a culture that I'm completely unfamiliar with. It's why we can still enjoy fantasy stories that are set in a world that doesn't even exist. We don't have to understand the world or be part of it to relate to the characters or to understand the story, because the theme is universal. And because themes are universal, stories don't have to be. Stories can be specific to one lived experience and still have a lot of lessons for whoever reads them, because we can relate to the emotions or the themes. And that gives everyone reading it something to interpret or to make their own. So for example, one of the most prominent themes in Jane Austen novels is marriage, to the point where most people think that that's all her novels are about, just women getting married at the end of the book and there's nothing else of substance really happening. What she was actually doing was writing about a woman's place in the world and the struggles that women faced because of their position in the world. That idea, the feeling of being restricted based on what society says that you should be or that you're allowed to be, is still really relatable to me, even though Jane Austen was writing about rich white ladies from 200 years ago. Because to me, because I get to bring my own lived experiences to my understanding of the story, I'm reminded of respectability politics and how those unwritten rules tell Black women and other women of color what we should and shouldn't do in order to be worthy of respect. Whether or not I pay attention to them, there are still strict rules that dictate the way that I speak, the way that I interact with other people, the way that I dress. So the idea of feeling stifled by society, yeah, pretty relatable. And even though the lives of the characters in Pride and Prejudice, one of my favorite books of all time, are completely unrelatable to me, a Black woman living in the 21st century, it doesn't mean that I can't still relate to the theme of letting go of your pride in favor of learning something new about yourself. I would never actually do it, but I can relate to it. Point is, everyone brings their own backgrounds and cultures and perspectives to reading any book. So when you have a more diverse community reading something together, that means you get so many new ways to read and understand a text that you already know and love. You get new ways to understand the same story. Even if you don't see yourself in a story, you still get to love it. That's the great thing about reading. There are no rules to how you understand things. You get to make the rules and you get to create your own meaning. Plus, reading outside of your experience makes you a more well-rounded and empathetic person. So speaking of gatekeepers, when was the last time you read something outside of the Western canon? A Nigerian writer? An Indian writer? Something that was translated into English? Oh, don't worry, I'll wait.
We can think about that for a second.
When we read any historical fiction, we can use experiences that are totally different from ours to find new ways of looking at and understanding our own lives. Maybe that's Jane Austen for you, maybe it's something completely different, but whatever it is, it's valid and it's yours. Love that thing out loud and don't let people shame you for it. Thank you so much for participating in Virtual JaneCon. Make sure that you check out all the other fantastic creators who have participated in creating content this weekend. We've put a link to the program with everyone's information in the description box below.
If you want to see more Reclaiming Jane, all of our links are also in the description box. And don't forget to send your trans Darcy fics.
Please.
Actually, we're serious.
Yeah, send the fics.
We want to see them.
Please. Like right now. Did you do it?